Welcome to the Milk Bottle e-commerce show, brought to you by Milk Bottle Labs, Ireland's top-rated and officially accredited Shopify and Klaviyo e-commerce experts. Founder Keith Matthews interviews e-commerce professionals, app developers and entrepreneurs to share as much digital knowledge and e-commerce tips and tricks as possible. This podcast is kindly supported by our go-to e-commerce tools, Rewind.io, the leading backup solution for Shopify, BigCommerce, Trello and more. Let's just say it's the cheapest insurance policy you'll ever get for your Shopify store and all your valuable data. Simply go to rewind.io/milk bottle to get your first month for free. Our go-to Shopify application to supercharge in-store pickup and local delivery on your Shopify store is Zapiet. It's fully customizable and scalable from one location to thousands. Backed by outstanding customer support, it's no wonder Zapiet is trusted by over 10,000 plus stores across 150 countries. Now over to your host, Keith Matthews.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Milk Bottle Labs e-commerce show. Today I am chatting to Luke Carthy. Luke is renowned for his expertise in driving double and even triple-digit growth for e-commerce brands. He's a keen understanding of the digital landscape, and his innovative approach to conversion rate optimization have made him a sought-after name in the industry. The last time I met Luke, he was presenting at the e-commerce live event in Belfast, and I was impressed, but it was actually my second time seeing Luke, so I'm really delighted to have him with us. Luke, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you, Keith. It's an honour to be having a good old chat, to be honest, so thanks for having me on.
Let's talk about CRO and SEO and making more money for customers. And of course, Luke, we will also discuss Google Analytics 4, which has just gone live. Or is that another false date by Google? Was June 30th the deadline?
Yeah, so officially 1st of July is when Google promised us they were going to switch off Universal Analytics and roll out GA4. For the most part, they've stuck to that date. However, there are a handful of people, quite a large handful of people, who still have their Universal Analytics tracking, continuing to track. I would imagine they probably die out over the coming weeks and so on. But some people are holding on to it for dear life. Like an absolute madman, as we were just talking offline, I decided in the midst of it to go to Vegas during the transition and go and get married. So I was out of the country when the migration actually happens. So I'm still finding out, literally, with clients. I guess in the silence is golden, and nothing has come up. I've done some manual checks this morning. Everyone seems to be happy with the migrations I've done. So, but yes, it's definitely migrating and moving across.
Yeah. It's like New Year's Eve, Luke. Sometimes if you just go to bed at 10 o'clock and wake up in the morning, it's all over and you miss nothing. So hopefully, hopefully that's the case. Look, we will talk about Google Analytics 4 in more detail in a while, but just give us your background. I was very impressed with, I wouldn't say I was impressed with your CV, but I was very impressed with your profile when I met you 2 last years in Belfast in terms of your depth of knowledge, kind of what I would kind of call kind of no bullshit knowledge. You know, you weren't using terminology, you were using practicality. You go in, you do the work, you see the results really, really quickly. So I suppose for Shopify store owners that are not necessarily focused on, you know, conversion rate optimization, just give us the background to what it is you do and how you got into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So effectively, I do e-commerce growth, and that involves a number of hats, which all kind of operate in the same space. So SEO is naturally one, conversion optimization, analytics, and strategy. But equally, what's really interesting is I don't often like to sell services. I like to sell a solution to a problem. So lots of people will reach out to me, and clients will reach out to me and say, hey, I need X, which is normally SEO. Then we have a look, have a poke through their site, take a look at what's happening, and then realize SEO may not be all or any of their problem. Actually, they have a UX issue. There's a problem on mobile, for example. It's difficult to use. Site search is painful. But as far as the client's concerned, they're receiving SEO. But ultimately, a lot of clients want SEO because they want more revenue. But of course, more traffic doesn't necessarily mean more revenue, right? So it's a case of what I basically do is listen to what the customer is looking for, the client is looking for, forget the services that they want. What is the outcome that you're looking for? And then I kind of reverse engineer that and make that happen. But to answer your second question, how did I get into this? So I started in the world of e-com at about 16, 17, and I was at my first job, long story short, back in the days where you had the big TVs, the big kind of CRT televisions with the big backs, and we were transitioning across to the flat screens, right, to LCD. And HD TVs had just started to come out. And of course, HDMI cables were painfully expensive back then. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to see if I can buy some of these and sell them. So I got into buying them in bulk, selling them on eBay, got to a situation where it was, incredibly successful online business, started experimenting with different listings, different offers, different pricing, free postage, all sorts of kind of experimentation. And then I learned the optimization game on eBay and really fell in love with the whole process of buying and selling and kind of operating online.
Luke, do you know one thing that amazes me in all of the world of Magento, WordPress, Shopify that we live in? eBay started most people off, and it is still a serious e-commerce player, and they're never discussed. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody talks about D2C and B2B, but marketplaces cannot be underrated.
Yeah.
Even if it's just to work out appetite for a product, or to get yourself off the ground, or even get to a point where you can see if your business model is going to stack before you go and invest a load of cash in a website and everything else. So, I love the things. I think eBay and Amazon are a great proposition. They've got the downsides.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. They're not cheap. You don't get the data, all that sort of good stuff. Yeah. But as a running model to drive revenue and to reach a new audience that you otherwise would trouble to do so, I think they're brilliant. Yeah,
fully agreed. So I suppose you cut your cloth then learning how to optimize on eBay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And eBay is very different to an independent platform or an independent Shopify store, independent Magento store. But was there a lot of SEO or CRO elements that you would have used and learned in eBay that could be carried over to an individual platform?
Yeah, for sure. I think eBay, at least back then, I'm sure, I'm not as close to it as I used to be, but the algorithm and the way to kind of win at eBay back then was a heck of a lot simpler. So, for example, back in the day, eBay's site search tool was pretty terrible. So if someone's searched for HDMI with a typo, I think back then when it was newly introduced, we had people calling it HMDI and all kinds of weird and wonderful things. So I used to optimize for the typos. I used to use a tool called Terapeak, which I don't know if it exists anymore, but it was an incredible tool at understanding how people are searching on eBay, so what consumers are looking for, misspellings, typos, best performing sellers in a particular vicinity or space, the sort of price you should sell at. And I used all of that intel to kind of create my listings and optimize them, which meant I could sell the most for the lowest amount of money, because obviously selling in certain categories is cheaper than others.
Yeah.
When it comes to SEO, there's a lot of similarities there in the sense of understanding how people are searching and behaving online. So how to connect with your audience, who you're competing with. That then bleeds into things like paid search, which I guess is a whole other topic altogether. But ultimately, it's very similar. You've got an audience who want to buy something, and you want to provide a service, a portal, a website that encourages those people to buy from you as opposed to someone else. Different ball game in many ways, but the premise of e-commerce absolutely kind of spans both marketplaces and Shopify, WooCommerce, Magento, whatever it might be.
Yeah, no, you're dead right, and there's a lot of people making a living purely out of optimizing Amazon accounts. So, you're not wrong. Absolutely. So I've noticed something over the last few years is that when people talk about SEO, it has become this really broad term. Like I think, 1998 or 1999, whenever Google went live, SEO was, original content, title tags, alt tags, and multiple other small tricks of the trade that you could implement on a site and to boost your ranking. Do you find now that, like you mentioned UX earlier on, for example, do you find now that everybody groups paid search, SEO and UX kind of into the one pot, and that I think there's a misunderstanding amongst people as to what independently SEO is on its own?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because there's definitely a hard divide, at least from my perspective. And you've kind of got SEO on this side, and then there's the kind of the borderline, if you like, is paid search. So SEO here, paid search here. What's really interesting is on the SEO side, almost everything else is rolled into that. So as you said, UX, conversion optimization, funnel analysis, recommendations, product copy, design, site speed, all of that sits in SEO. And paid search has its own kind of beast and animal and subtasks and everything else. But SEO very much seems like the kind of header, if you like, an umbrella for all the kind of smaller micro tasks underneath it. But of course, the reason why I believe that's the case is because paid search is, with all intents and purposes, you have a cost, you have a ROAS to report on, and profitability off the back of it. SEO, the numbers are softer. There's a heavy investment to make. It takes time before you see a return. And in some cases, the return may or may not be what the client expects. It really depends on the game they operate in. So there's a lot more to kind of move the needle. So, I'll give you a perfect example of this. I think this is the fundamental reason why if somebody says they want SEO, and then I want to understand their reasons why. That's why I can jump in rather than just give them precisely what they're asking for, right? So what's really interesting is it's probably a ridiculous example, but you wouldn't necessarily call a tradesperson and say that you want something in your house to be built with this material using these screws and these nails. When it comes to SEO, it's like, I want you to do it this way. As opposed to just saying, I want you to build me a new kitchen and this is how I want it to look.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to focus more as SEOs. We need to focus a heck of a lot more on what the end goal is, what the client wants and what success is, and reverse engineer that. Yeah. And that for me has allowed me to build a consultancy that performs, does well, keeps clients happy, even if there's very little SEO in it, because there could be some clients where actually we haven't even touched SEO, been working together for 9 months, but we've just been getting a lot of the big low hanging fruit out of the way first, which is nothing to do with search. But either way, as long as the client's happy and people are making money, then it's really interesting. But yeah, it's a good old game.
But Luke, is it not difficult for you to stay on top of Google and to stay on top of changes? You know, like, again, without repeating myself, things are changing. You know, things are changing now every 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Now, I know if Google makes a major update to its platform or changes its algorithm, I mean, it's giving everybody a lot of notice. But like, you could be working with a customer for 12 months before you'd see any movement of the dial. Is that right?
In some cases, yes. I'd say the only real situations where a 12-month window is a fair assumption is if it's a brand new website with no domain authority operating in a super competitive space. So that there are situations where you can expect to invest about 12 months. However, if I'm taking on board a fairly established or even a family-owned business with some solid authority, we can have an uplift in like a couple of months. But it really depends on what the uplift is. Right. And this goes back to my whole point of what's the client KPI, because if they're going to look at rankings, then sure, that might take 6 months. But if their core kind of goal and sort of trajectory is revenue, then who's to say we can't change and optimize that in 2 weeks and 3 weeks and 4 weeks. Right. So to kind of go back to your question of how do you stay on top of Google? In my opinion, right, controversial perspective is I just don't. I think about what the customer wants, because if you reverse engineer this, Google works in a way that connects people to the data, the result, the information as quickly as possible and provides the user with the best possible result. So if you, as an e-commerce retailer, are providing the best result, Google will reward you for it. If you try your best to try and reverse engineer the algorithm and understand that, the components that make things work, you'll end up being lost. So if you look after your customers, you provide the best experience, you have content that's authoritative, original, helpful, concise. In most cases, you'll win. So it's really a case of, first of all, think about what the customer wants. And second of all, then optimizing it for search. And that as a formula will always kind of consistently work. You can, me as a professional, I will spend time reading and getting to the macro of how SEO works and big shift changes. But in most cases, if you follow that kind of formula of what customers want, make it technically sound, make it fast, you'll be okay. You should be all right.
Look, you made an interesting point there about a startup, new e-commerce store with no domain authority. So is it very simple? If you want to have success with a brand new business, a brand new brand sitting on a new domain, you have to do both. You have to paid search and you also have to invest in SEO. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of situation is a great opportunity to work out what works before you go and invest in it in SEO. So if we get down to the macro of keywords, right, which I don't really like to do all that often because SEO is way bigger than just keywords. Paid search gives you a real opportunity to throw, a couple £100, a couple £1,000 on a campaign bidding for certain keywords to see what performs and what works. Once you've kind of ran through maybe 3 months, maybe even 6 months of understanding what keywords, queries, and parameters work, you can start to invest in SEO for some of those. Right. So you use kind of paid search to quickly test the water, spend a few quid, and then adapt that across to SEO. And the beauty of that then is you're in a situation where paid search is so quick, within sort of probably an hour, depending on what it is you're bidding on, you can be approved and running for ads. So if those ads are performant, particularly if they're expensive, why not think about moving across to SEO? However, my advice would be for a startup, fresh out the gates, brand new website, think about long tail. So if you sell light bulbs, there is absolutely no point in being in a situation where we're going to work together and I'm going to get you to number one for light bulbs in a year. Like, there's no point. One, because the query light bulbs is probably not conversion centric. So people don't search for light bulbs specifically when they're looking for light bulbs because it's too generic a term. Yes, loads of volume. Yes, it's a great vanity keyword, but is it going to bring you any money? Probably not. The stuff that really works is the long tail stuff, right? So bayonet light bulbs or LED light bulbs or LEDs for particular applications or those really granular long tail keywords is where the money's at, right? So when we think about an SEO strategy, we do all the keyword research, we find out what particular keywords has real opportunity but low competition. And this is where we start. But yes, I think what gives SEO a bad name is when someone is fresh out the gates with a new site, maybe it's been online for 3 months, maybe even up to a year, and someone talks a good game and thinks, yeah, light bulbs UK, let's focus on that. Because there's no point. I mean, even if you get there and even if you got to page 1, it's not going to pay commercially. It's too broad. And if you think about yourself as a consumer again, what are you as a consumer going to search for when you're looking for a light bulb, a specific light bulb? Light bulb is a broad term, it's probably not. You've got so many different specifications, sizes, prices, colors,
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. Question for you.
Sure.
If you're a new brand launching and you're selling Nike runners and your distributor gives you 10,000 product descriptions that another 10,000 sites all over the world have, are you as well off not to use the descriptions and leave the description blank, or use the descriptions?
Use the descriptions.
Okay.
Google has its gaps, and it can be a bit daft at times, but Google isn't stupid in the sense of if 1,000 retailers across the world are selling the same trainer, there is very little reward in creating unique descriptions for the same item. It's not going to pay dividends, right?
Okay.
So if you are selling a handful of items, maybe 100, 200, go away and write custom descriptions for them. If you are basically a new JD Sports or a new kind of Foot Locker, going away and spending thousands of pounds writing unique descriptions for these products is probably not going to move the needle for SEO for you, because you're competing with everybody else and people are still buying the same trainer. Where product descriptions really pays dividends is when you're selling something that's unique. So your own brand, your own product, something that you're not reselling, it's your own actual item. Go away and invest the energy in doing that. Or actually, my advice would be in this situation, spend all your resource and time when it comes to content on optimizing your category descriptions, right? And building the right taxonomy. So you might find that a lot of your competitors would have something like men's running shoes, men's Nike running shoes, women's, and so on. But you could definitely make it more granular than that, right? Because Nike has sub-brands, whether it's Air or Jordans, there's different sizes, there's different colors, there's different price points. Create those categories and dominate those particular keywords. So when someone searches for men's Nike Air runners or a particular technology or kind of foot plate, you are ranking for it. Luke, because there's no point trying to compete with the likes of Sports Direct.
That's a very good point. And to our listeners, to our Shopify users, can do that now in Shopify Online Store 2.0 using meta fields. And we recently launched a site, runhub.ie, which speaks to exactly what you have just said, where the products are categorized and searchable by what we would call attributes in terms of size, whether it's a long distance runner, what color it is, whether it's male or female, etc., etc. So that's actually a really, really good point. Just hold for 1 second, Luke, while we listen to our sponsors. Rewind.io is the leading data backup solution for your Shopify store. Did you know that there is no way of recovering lost data in Shopify? If your store is gaining traction, you may have multiple staff or third-party developers entering your store. Mistakes can happen and data can be easily deleted. Rewind.io puts you in control of your data, allowing you to restore anything accidentally lost from a single image to an entire store. It acts as a pretty cheap insurance policy for your Shopify account. At Milk Bottle, we help clients reduce their business risk by installing Rewind in every single store before we make any changes. Get your first month for free by simply replying to your sign-up email. You mentioned earlier on about UX, okay? So it surprises me sometimes the amount of poor UX on busy e-commerce stores.
Yes.
And I've never been able to understand how some people don't understand the obvious, okay? So when you mentioned low-hanging fruit earlier on, is that the kind of thing that you're talking about? An add to cart button in the wrong place, a search bar, a poorly designed menu? Are they the kind of low-hanging fruit that you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's always those faux pas in, a number of out-of-the-box themes and startups who naturally, don't necessarily know any better. Their expertise is not in e-commerce.
Yeah.
It's in products. But one thing, I personally put situations in two parts. One is brand equity. So even if the UX is bad, the brand loyalty is so powerful that people will always continue to flock. So I'll give you a great example. Sports Direct is one of those brands where their website is actually pretty decent. But if you think about it as a brand, the service is normally bad. You can't return anything, right? And you can't get your money back, at least. You have to exchange things. There is a customer experience knock on that's shrouded. Primark is another one in the space of apparel. We think about, say, I mean, Apple's probably way too broad, but we'll use it anyway. You know, you're going to pay a premium to get that product because it's all invested in brand. When you don't have that brand equity and you are kind of new to the market space, or you're a small kind of independent brand, you haven't got that weight to carry you along. So you have to then be better. And the way in which you can be better is to provide a seamless user experience. And I think many people can agree with me. I for certain over the years, I've struggled with Amazon, like returning something, finding something specific in the menu, even like their checkout. It's nice and quick, but you just adapt to its quirks because it's Amazon. It's huge. The product selection is massive. Could you be a startup and create those same quirks in the that you'd expect in the Amazon app? No, because you haven't got that brand authority. So site search, when someone is looking for something, make it easy for them to find things. Mobile navigation, can't say this enough. This is often where a lot of people fall down. Make sure your mobile nav is easy to use and isn't scrollable, because it often doesn't work very well. Little things like pagination. How many products are you putting on a page? If it's 5, it's too few. If it's 100, probably too many. Is it slow to load? What's the checkout like? Is it a pain? Is there a guest checkout for me to use? Like all of these things, right? And you'd be amazed at how many clients I onboard that are just skipping past the basics. So if we fix them, they believe they've had SEO, revenue is up, so they're happy, but I haven't actually technically started SEO yet. This is purely just making it easy to use.
Yeah. And like, I mean, look, we primarily talk about Shopify on this podcast, but I mean, there's many, many great platforms out there. But the beauty about using, a hosted platform is the fact that the checkout is pre-built and it's pre-tested. So anybody that switches on a Shopify store, provided they, set up the checkout properly, they don't really have to worry about whether it's going to convert or not, or whether the checkout button isn't going to work, because it is going to work, because it's the same checkout button that's sitting on, a few million other stores. So there's a simplicity of these platforms. I suppose what I'm trying to say is I don't think people realize now that are getting into it, how difficult it was before these platforms existed. I always find it interesting how people complain sometimes about the price of Shopify and the commission charges and this kind of thing and the price of apps, when in actual fact, well, you want to go and build a custom solution there yourself and see how much it's going to cost you,
Yeah, that's true. The one caveat I'd throw into that is some people can rest all too comfortably on Shopify fixing everything for them. So some of the worst sites I've seen, as far as UX is concerned, have come from, they've been hosted on Shopify.
Yeah.
Of course, yes, as you say, once you get to the checkout, everything is familiar and common and consistent. But what about your product pages? Your navigation is still you, your theme's still you, your search results is still your problem. How you sort things on a category page is still you. Faceted navigation is still your problem, right? There's all those kind of things. But of course, the checkout is only important once you've got through the first thing of allowing customers to buy something.
Yes.
Now, the cleanest checkout in the world, if getting to that point is a pain in the ass, you're never going to realize its potential, right? So if anything, there's probably more onus on Shopify stores, considering the fees you have to pay to get everything else right to make the checkout work as it needs to.
Indeed. Luke, Google Analytics 4.
Yes.
So the switchover date was June 30th, as we mentioned there earlier on. What is the major? You presented on this the last time we met, so I know that you're an authority on it. I'm sure there's a load of changes that it will take people like consultants like yourself a long time to understand exactly every single little change. What are the major differences in July 2023 with Google Analytics 4 versus June with the prior version?
Yeah, so I think the biggest kind of frustration that people are having is how the UX works. Those predefined reports that you used to kind of lean on in UA no longer exist. Bounce rate is an interesting one because that no longer exists in there anymore. But fundamentally, how UA and how GA4 works is entirely different. But my advice to people who, one, don't have the time, or two, don't want to learn about GA4, they just want the data as they've always had it, then this is where Data Studio comes in, right? And whether that's something that people do themselves or they hire someone to do for them, create a Data Studio report and just present things how you want to. So the way I like to see it is GA4 is very much a facility and a powerful way to capture data, to record analytics. Data Studio is very much the presentation layer. So GA4 is way more powerful than UA ever was for a multitude of reasons, which we won't get into now. But Data Studio is literally your dashboard. Presentation layer, how it looks, how it feels. So I think it's really important to separate those two. And if people want UA, go and build UA in Data Studio with GA4 data. That is probably the best way to soften the blow in the transition.
So has it become more complicated? Like for the average user that's using analytics, using at a basic level, looking at users, looking at locations, is there an element of education required to move across? Or is it like, when you log into your analytics account, Google is constantly telling you, make sure you switch over, make sure you switch over, make sure you switch over. And it's kind of frightening, I think, to people. I think it looks as if it's a bigger deal than it actually is, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. So does it require skills and learning to transition over?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think it absolutely is. It's more of a complex tool, and with more power becomes more complex, right? So to use an analogy, it's like going from Shopify to Magento. They both sell products online, but to configure one is quite straightforward. To configure the other one, it's you're probably best to get a professional in to do that for you. But learning curve is higher, the potential is greater. To give you an example, the way in which GA4 records transactions is different to how it did in UA. But also in GA4, you can record so many more different types of events, custom events with your own parameters. So great example, UA only uses category, action, and label on events, right? That classic kind of 3-tier event capture. GA4, whatever you want. Like if you want 15 different data points in an event, you can have that. If you want one, you can have that. So it's a lot more powerful, which does, of course, require a relatively steep learning curve. And it does feel mostly unfamiliar. But this is kind of where, again, the data studio kind of softens that blow for you. So if you've got someone in the middle who is kind of helping with the transition, and as far as you're concerned as a business, it looks how it's always looked, and you can interpret the information, the data how you want to, perfect. But equally, if you're in a situation where you want to pick it up, you want to get under the hood of GA4, understand how it works and build it, so be it. But the kind of thing I like to explain is that UA was a very simple tool for marketers. GA4 is a tool for analysts, right? And I think that's the big difference. It's no longer a marketing platform.
But you could pay somebody like you to set up your data studio once, and you could use that dashboard forever, couldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's ultimately what I'm kind of doing for clients at the moment is just, look, if you don't want to be part of the GA4 noise, you just want to do what you've always done, which is work out where to improve, where your opportunities are, grow your business. Great. And I think, again, to use an analogy, because I love using these things, why would you try and research stocks and shares and go all kind of dark and under the hood of how that works when a lot of people just pay a financial advisor to look after a portfolio? It's pretty much the same kind of thing. Use a specialist or spend the time working it out for yourself.
Yeah.
And I respect people who do both, but in the world of e-commerce, time is money. You want to stick with the product, stick where you know, which is normally what you sell it at, who your competitors are, how you can make more money, and actually leave analytics to somebody else,
So, Luke, have they taken anything out that you will miss as a consultant?
That's a really good question. There's a few things, but they are slowly coming back in, to be honest. So one was e-commerce conversion rate. Believe it or not, that was an omission from GA4, and I just could never understand it because it's quite an important metric for me. So that was a real pain. I would also say that they've introduced some new and weird and wonderful limits, which only really probably impacts the power users at the UA end, which is a bit of a shame. But for most kind of businesses, it's not really going to come into view. I would say at this stage, no. I think what's going to be really interesting is by the end of this year, we should be in a situation where GA4 should be fully mature enough to be a direct replacement product. There are some gaps for sure. Actually, there is one thing, which is a real pain. That's just come back to me. I really am irritated by the fact that GA4 takes 24 hours to show data in the reports when UA took, was virtually instant.
Yeah.
That is a real pain for anyone. For me personally, as a consultant who's trying to debug a problem, I make a fix. I have to wait 24 hours to validate that fix in some cases, but also for businesses. If you're in a situation where you run hour to hour, a lot of turnover, a lot of volatility, for example, or if you're watching like your Black Friday campaign closely, yes, of course, you've got your Shopify dashboards and everything else. But for people who previously used the hourly reports in UA, that is gone. And that is a real shame. I'm on a roll now, so there is one more, sorry. Comments or annotations on the timeline. So when you launched a new site, launched a new sale, launched a new product, you could put those little speech icons on the timeline. They've gone. Yeah. I really hope they come back. But yeah, for the most part, it's a better product. But there are some ridiculously silly omissions from GA4.
Yeah, it's probably, I suppose, in 12 months' time, everybody, especially guys like yourself that are in it every day, will look back on it and go, it's probably workable. They've probably thought about things very cleverly that we'll only really fully understand maybe in time to come.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Luke, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Same, likewise.
Thank you very, very much. We will put links to all of your life on the interwebs there in the show notes. And I look forward to seeing you again, possibly in Belfast, maybe next year.
Yeah, fingers crossed, huh? But yeah, it's been awesome. Thanks again for having me on.
Thanks for listening. All of our episodes are available on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. A special note of appreciation goes to our sponsors, Rewind.io, the leading backup solution for Shopify store owners. Get your first month of Rewind for free by simply responding to any welcome email once you sign up for your free trial on Rewind.io. If you're a Shopify user with an exciting story to tell, reach out to the team on podcast@milkbottlelabs.com. Until the next time, take care.